Good evening. Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie. Patriots Against CPS Corruption invites you to attend our March for Texas Children. DFPS has failed the families of Texas. The Texas Special Committee on DFPS has also failed to hear the parents. It's time to make our voices heard and surround yourselves with those on the same mission as you. Join us on the March for Our Children, September 21st, 2022, starting at 1 p.m. at 701 West 51st Street, Austin, Texas, 78751. Patriot parents are also encouraging this to happen throughout the states. Now, I have a brand new guest. His name is Steve Thomas. He's chairman, Kentucky Society of Professional Investigators and director of Kentucky Special Investigative Unit in Louisville, Kentucky. Steve started out as a private investigator in 1991. He now owns the company and operates as director of operations, managing a team of private investigators, process servers specializing in insurance fraud, criminal defense, infidelity, child custody, and witness location. So I welcome you to the show, Steve Thomas. However, did you get into all this?
Purely by accident. I was working 3 jobs and going to college at night to support my family and my disabled mother. I was working in a bail bonds office. They still have bail bondsmen in Indiana, just across the bridge here in Jeffersonville. And I was attempting to skip trace a gentleman who had skipped out on his bond, a $10,000 bond, for failure to pay child support. And he worked for a private investigative agency in Louisville. So every time I called and asked for him, he was in the field, they'd leave a message. And every time I would, ask for the owner or the owner's name, they would refuse or ask to take a message. So I did it the old fashioned way. And I looked him up and, I called the Secretary of State, found out who owned the company. And then I called the cable company. And the first thing they ask you when you call the cable company is, what's your phone number? I said, I have 6 lines coming into this house. Which one do you want? Well, what's your name? And I gave it to him. They gave me my phone number. They gave me his phone number, the owner's phone number. So I called him, and his daughter, who I knew, who I've known for 30 years. Now she was 5 at the time. She ran for daddy. And his first question was, how did you get this number? I told him, I said, listen, I'd love to tell you, but I'd have to drive all the way out there, kill you, and then drive back and clock out. I don't have time for that, but ultimately, I need to find this guy. The next day he pulled up in front of my office in a canary yellow vet in a $3,000 suit. And he walked into my office in the bail bonds and he said, you're the expletive that called my house. And I said, yes, I am. And he said, you're wasting your talent here, and threw a business card down on my desk. Again, 20 years later, I bought the company from that man. That was my start in the investigative business. But most of it, I worked with Neil Aliotto, a real detective from the Son of Sam investigation. He was an NYPD detective who trained me for many years and was like a father figure to me. So he taught me a lot about being grateful and giving back and helping, people who can't afford our services, but we have the power to do that. And, we have the means, and we have, we make time. So it was a pure accident. And, like I said, I thought he walked in to cuss me out. He hired me on the spot because I found him. And to this day, I never told him how I got his phone number. But what was fascinating is that not only did he hire me, but he told me where the other investigator was. He was his manager at a Taco Bell.
Oh, wow. That's clever.
So we were able to take care of that. Yeah, it was a whirlwind. And again, in the early days of investigations, we didn't have, we had VHS cameras with 8-pound battery packs and, 10 times zoom lenses this long. We called them the news camera. They were this big, and we're driving, and now we have cameras that fit in the palm of our hand. We have GPS on our phone, databases, access, like I said, investigations in 1991 was pre-internet. We didn't have internet. We had a crisscross directory. We had a phone book, and we had a phone, and that's how you investigate, unless it was out on the street. I try to tell my investigators, how lucky they are. And,
Oh,
I've challenged many of them with double pay to take one of my old VHS cameras out, into the field without their phones and without GPS, use the Rand McNally Road Atlas, get close to the place at 6 o'clock in the morning and start looking for Rural Route 1 HC Box 4. There are no street signs in Eastern Kentucky. There are no roads, mostly washed out creek beds. And everybody there has an AR-15. Back in my day, it was a 12-gauge shotgun because they had a moonshine still out back to protect. In the 90s, it became opiates, and they would bus loads of elderly patients down to Florida, and it's, for a free trip to Florida. And then when they returned, they were to hand over their prescriptions, their OxyContin at $80 a pill, as they came off the bus. So, they had that. And then, of course, now it's all meth. Now they have ARs, they have automatic weapons, and, they're protecting their meth labs where they make $2,500, an hour, basically, mixing poisons that destroy lives and destroy worlds. So, it's, Kentucky's an interesting place. I mean, it's geographically, it's quite diverse. Louisville, my city, and the city where I work, and that brought me to this podcast was the Dr. Stephanie Russell case. All your podcasts now, but at the end of it, I was compelled, like I said, to do digging, and it was quite eye-opening. Lots of red flags.
What was the most outstanding red flag that you saw in this case?
Again, like I said, this is a court case. I assume it's public record, and I assume that just like any case, one could request a copy or perhaps view a copy, or request video, what have you, and see. What compelled me the most was a series of reports by court-appointed officers, affidavits, statements, etc., made by everybody from Child Protective Services to to visitation supervisors, court-appointed psychiatric evaluators, that even retired sheriffs acting as visitation supervisors. I know there's some of that that filed reports with some very startling allegations made by a 5-6-year-old. And after 30 years of doing this, I like to think that I have a feel. I have a bit of I can kind of tell when something has merit. True or not, that's my job, is to find out, is to find the truth. But at the end of the day, I think that it's again, like I said, this whole case is problematic, and the system it fails. It has failed, and it appears to be failing in most other states. The entire system itself as a whole, whether here in a Commonwealth or across the country in California. There are some serious malfeasances that this abuse and these dangerous environments and these this exposure to these things, if valid, affect every aspect of that child's life for their entire life till they draw their last breath. It's happening every day. I know it happens here every day in Louisville. Louisville is one of 120 counties. I've worked them all. And at the end of the day, well, let's put it this way. 2/3 of the vehicles in the entire state, out of all 120 counties, 2/3 of them are registered here in Louisville. So that tells you how much of the population, what the population density is here compared to the mountains of Appalachia in Eastern Kentucky. You've seen Deliverance?
Yes. Oh, yes, with the banjo. Oh,
it's real. It's very real.
That's
and
scary.
Keep in mind that you can't just drive in and conduct surveillance or work in these places, because typically these washed out creek beds and dirt roads without street signs are family owned.
Hmm.
They own the mountain, or they own that side of the mountain, and everybody on that street is family, or are so insular that, I mean, you can't set foot. You cross the county line, even police officers, will put you out, will go to the house, if you don't work under pretext, under some sort of pretext, and not disclose the true purpose of your visit, then, they will. I've seen them many times, on other investigators who weren't smart enough to use a pretext. They go straight to the front door, they knock on the door, and they point at the surveillance vehicle, and they say, that guy down the street, he's watching you. He's investigating. He's a private investigator. It's a critical downfall, and something I developed early on in my career to avoid that. Like I said, it's it varies so widely, but still in all, I've seen convicted felons get out of prison, get joint custody immediately upon their release, for heinous crimes. And interestingly enough, they also bought a $500,000 A-frame house set back in the woods shortly after their release from prison for methamphetamine manufacturing, big time. So, it all begs the question, why is there video of this, and audio and all of these reports on the Doc Russell case, and none of them were admitted as evidence? I mean, and there are other judges, good judges in this town that would have been immediate grounds for, psych evaluation, something. There would have been some sanction, a supervised visit or something, imposed pending investigation, or, even joint custody. I mean, at the very least joint, but, that's not the case. It seems, and, for some crazy reason, invariably high numbers, inexplicably high numbers of people are not getting justice in this courtroom.
Hmm. It
And,
seems,
in front of justice front.
yeah, I mean, it's also happening to, some men that are complaining about this Judge Denise Brown, as
Oh,
well as.
Absolutely, and that's why I tend to lean towards the victims of domestic violence, simply because there are many males that have applied to join, to be members of this nonprofit, to work, to receive the firearms safety training, the self-defense training, classes like that change women's lives, to turn them from caterpillars into wasps, and and they are not to be messed with now. And at the end of the day, the males, I do require, that they pass a background check. They must, sign a waiver that allows me to run their background, because if they are the abuser, or they are, the stalker, or whomever it is, then obviously I need to take an extra step with the men. And frankly, if these men aren't willing to provide, that authorization, then obviously there's something they're hiding, and they're not qualified. It's just required of the men, unfortunately, not so much of the women.
Mm-hmm. But with this, in this courtroom with this judge, the question begs is, why is she on the bench?
Again, people, and that's another thing, we do a lot of election work, and people don't really realize how people get elected, and at every level of government. I've performed these, I've performed cases all the way up to, for congressmen, and at the end of the day, it's a mudslinging contest. It's digging for dirt. It is looking for anything that released just prior to the election will derail the incumbent's chance, or what have you, and by default, these people are elected, and that's why they hire me. That's why I'm so busy during election season, is because judges and council persons again, all the way up to congressmen, you know, governors have hired me,
Mhm.
to investigate their rivals because they've felt threatened, their position was threatened or what have you, or the rival, wanted the incumbent's job, enough to pay money to have somebody investigate him and, and see look into things like campaign contributions, um, shell companies moving money around, things like that. It's happened. I've seen it. And,
Mhm.
so that's one way that I know that, some judges get on the bench. We've had councilwomen, who were attorneys who were appointed to the bench because there was an opening. They were just councilwomen who were formerly attorneys, and now they're overseeing and deciding these cases, whatever their bias, whatever their position on race, gender, sex, obviously, sexual orientation. I mean, it again, there are judges who don't see any of that, and they do the right thing. In this particular case, as I did a little more digging, I found early on that there was a federal case. And as it turned out, this was a federal case filed against Judge Brown by a former attorney, Stephanie Russell's attorney. Had filed a federal lawsuit against Judge Denise Brown. And in that lawsuit, as I understand, he broke client confidentiality and disclosed that she was in fact guilty of the crime that that he represented and ultimately beat the charge on. So, these two are bitter rivals right here, right now. And frankly, they both, he should have never taken the case knowing that he was going up against, someone that he was at war with. And she should have recused herself immediately as the defendant in a case by this guy, or being named in a case by this guy, and possibly being outed if in fact if my facts are correct.
Mhm.
So from the start, neither one of these individuals should have been in the same courtroom,
Mhm.
but they were for a very long time, and for most of Dr. Russell's defeats.
Mhm.
you know, uh, yes, this went on for a long time. She trusted this attorney, and like I said, he never bothered to mention this case, even though she considered him a friend. And again, I don't know that Judge Brown has answered to the allegations, but I think that, like with anything, I did 60 Days In on A&E a couple of years ago. As a TV show where civilians go undercover as convicts, as inmates, in prisons. I was in an ICE detention facility on the Mexican border in Arizona, and it's 60 days undercover in prison, trying to find corruption and what have you. When that television show broke out, the haters came out of the woodwork. It was unbelievable. The people that just sit and spew, torrents of misspelled hatred for whatever reason, whether they hate themselves, they hate their lives, whatever it is they hate, they just hate. That's their job. That's what they do.
Mhm.
And in this particular case, especially, I expect major naysayers, major fallback, major haters coming out of the woodwork, alleging all kinds of things and making all kinds of arbitrary, uneducated, uninformed statements, when there's so much more to this case,
Mhm.
so much more. Again, the having done some digging into this matter, I find it fascinating that all of these reports and affidavits by court appointed by officers of the court were disregarded or outright ignored. Again, I think the phrase "methinks thou doth protest too much" applies in family court, and that's one major shortcoming, is that we've got full dockets. These things drag on for years. Oftentimes, sometimes if you have enough money, you can it could take years, 5 years to complete a divorce between two physicians or something like that, where there's substantial
Mhm.
assets and financial, backing there, resources. In this particular case, it's easy enough and anybody can verify, known associates of the intended target on this, in this quote, alleged intended target, I should say. My databases show that he has first degree known associates that are retired or are presently in federal law enforcement. And, that caught my attention simply because, in Jefferson County, Louisville in particular, these cases, these alleged cases of alleged murder for hire plots, were handled by the homicide division for as far back as I can remember. And then, in recent years, they developed the major crimes division, to spread the caseload out. And major crimes handled, these alleged murder for hire plots. It just struck me that why would the FBI be involved in a sting operation, when typically, major crimes has to have serious reason to initiate that. And they're the go-to. They're the ones that, that typically handle it, not the FBI. Again, red flag, you have friends in federal law enforcement, U.S. Marshals, Secret Service, et cetera, possibly the FBI. And at the end of the day, if not, they do contact sources. I have them as well. I have associates, in almost every form of federal law enforcement and local law enforcement. At the end of the day, that's how they solve crimes. People don't these crimes in front of them. They either initiate, with the sting operation with good cause, or the person's outright guilty. They just do it. I think that that's a big sticking point for me. That really doesn't add up, and coupled with this alleged court battle with Judge Brown and her attorney, Mr. Clay, as I understand, and the conflict there, the complete and total disregard of every affidavit, recording, complaint, and again, as I understand it, this child was 5, 6 years old. And, I have a daughter, and I remember when she was 5, and, and it was difficult to teach her the alphabet, early on, and counting to 100 and that kind of thing. But in my experience, to script and train a 5-year-old to tell varying stories and add details that no 5-year-old could possibly provide, without hesitation, to, again, these authority figures that they felt they could confide in, that they could trust. It just, again, in any other court, and not in any other court, but in several other courts, that would have gotten somebody's attention, right off the bat, perhaps, 1 or 2 in. But again, when this abuse spans decades, and and the children are involved and there are generations involved in this thing, it's a long story. There's a lot involved, and you really need to know all of it in order to appreciate the whole, and draw a reasonable conclusion about what happened. And it's not here. There's too many red flags. There's too many issues here that I can't explain. And like I said, I've been doing this for 3 decades. Never seen anything like this in my life.
And she's sitting in a jail cell on bond, no bail.
Well, I know that firsthand. It's national. It was shot around the world. They showed it, in 37 countries or something. So now everybody knows I've been to jail, and I can assure you that, I have met 1 or 2 very intelligent, educated, potentially innocent people. They know I'm an investigator. I've read their cases, and I've provided my input. But it's primarily animals. They are animals. And, it's very real. It's hell. It's not, a lot of times they'll say 23 hours a day, and that kind of, it's not 23 hours a day. It's 24 hours a day, 6 days a week, 20 minutes for a shower.
Mhm.
Again, we had an individual shoot a mayoral candidate, walk into a psychotic individual, clearly, or at least by my estimation, walk into a mayoral candidate for the 2024 election, walked into his office and opened fire on him, and actually left a bullet hole in his sweater. It came so close to murdering this guy, who was released the next day. He was released on home incarceration the very next day. Now, he walked in there and tried to kill this man with a gun and was released the next day. Dr. Russell, who's never had a parking ticket, is a pillar of the medical and pediatric community in this city, and she can't make bond, or she can't get HIP with with GPS. I mean, she no longer has the means. The divorce cost her everything. She didn't even have enough to allegedly pay this guy, as far as the news says. So it's like, there was nothing left to take, except her freedom, simply because this is a Commonwealth state, Mary. And in the Commonwealth, most of these judges, a good percentage of these judges, are operating under an antiquated idea of, that the child should be with their birth mother. And, like I said, invariably, these children go back. I mean, like I said, the things that I've seen, over my career, it's madness. I've actually presented video in a case, of a young lady, going through a divorce and a custody battle, who I had to lay on the hood of her car and shoot her through the windshield, because she had nodded off from the heroin she had just shot in her arm, while her 2-year-old daughter frolicked in the back seat of a running car, with no seatbelt, car seat, or anything. And and she was unconscious she nodded for a good 15, 20 minutes. I videotaped every minute, blood running down. She's all tied up. She's parked next to some liquor store, in the worst part, in the armpit of the city. And her 2-year-old is running. Now, when we got to court the next day, and I validated the video, and my licensure, et cetera, and presented the video, the judge in that case said, "I don't care. The child should be with its mother. I don't care if she's a raging heroin addict. The child should be with his mother." And then they got custody. I mean, she kept the child. Well, she kept the child until she overdosed, and then obviously, So if that gives you any idea of how bad it really is, again, times have changed. Things have changed. Men are victims now. Men are parents, and and especially with all the progress we've made with not only civil rights, but especially the LGBTQ community, et cetera. There will be more male parents and more custody battles, and and victims of domestic violence. I hope not, but it is what it is, right?
It just seems things are just running askew in that courtroom for a lot of
Perhaps it's these
mothers.
southern states. I notice you have the Texas, or gathering that you've got going on. Tennessee. I've seen cases in South Carolina that are, and again, very, very different laws down there, but very similar mindsets, very similar. And of course, the only mindset that matters is the judges. The attorneys in the around town joke that if the judge got laid last night, then you will probably get a dismissal. He'll be in a good mood. Let's hope the judge got laid. Is a common joke around the courthouse, male or female. It is what it is. So like I said, it's an amazing time, but Kentucky for sure. And like I said, I've seen it repeated in many of the other. And who knows? Perhaps it's up north as well. I know that out west they're more progressive, but north they're more progressive. So it could be that it is simply a southern, just hard-headed, antiquated, system based on something that is is a total fallacy. I mean, again, my goal when I work these cases, and again, I do most of them pro bono because, it's very expensive to hire a private investigator, just like it's very expensive to hire a good lawyer, and these people don't have that kind of money. So, I work these cases pro bono in order to help, because CPS has failed. They're
Mhm.
completely understaffed and and their caseloads are, insane. The court systems, obviously, they fail. And, and the police, they can't do anything about it. There's nothing they can do to help. So that's, like I said, that's when they call me. I think, that, the entire thing needs to be reviewed. Family court changed recently. And I say recently, I mean, in the last few years here in Kentucky. And simply because of those cases I was telling you about, with the very successful, divorces. There's no successful divorce, but divorces between very successful people are one very successful person, and the one who supported him all those years while he got his degree, kind of thing,
Mhm.
and vice versa. Oftentimes, even more so now these days, men targeting women fresh out of college, they refer to them as their retirement plan. And and I mean, even their own friends, their own coworkers and partners don't know their wife's name, because when the phone rings, it's, oh, I have to get this. It's my retirement plan. They marry these very promising young doctors, medical professionals, attorneys, etc. And again, it seems it's odd, and it seems oddly common that they stay long enough to have two children, usually in an area of around 5 years, to get two children, not just one child to argue over, but two, to make, for a bigger case, bigger child support, bigger alimony, et cetera. And as these things drag on, these attorneys make literally hundreds of thousands of dollars representing each party. Each attorney makes hundreds of thousands of dollars on one case, just one of their cases, simply because they're that good. And it's so big that it requires experts and, auditors and people to come in and, evaluate these things. It's, it's a very difficult system to navigate. And, like I said, it's broken. The Again, it's not about removing the child, taking the child from their biological parent. I had a case recently where a young lady, was charged with a young lady that I was working a custody case on. I suspected her of her and her associates of drug use in a dangerous environment, and
Mhm.
ultimately she was arrested and charged with two felony, neglect of a dependent charges.
Mhm.
Because the children, when I arrived, were living in a one-bedroom apartment, four people, no furniture on the floor. They were holding their diapers up by the one sticky tab that was still attached because they were so full. They were ate up with sores, lice,
Mhm.
as it turned out. And I later found out that one of them tested positive for methamphetamine. 3 years
Mhm.
old. He tested positive for methamphetamine. The mother's answer in court was that I snuck into her apartment in the middle of the night and somehow introduced methamphetamine into her sleeping 3-year-old. Never woke anybody in a one-bedroom apartment as I broke in and, and
Mhm.
poisoned this child. That was her answer, was that it was the private investigator who did it. And again, like I said, you have to be very careful. Like I said, if you say the wrong thing, you're not represented properly, or, you say too much, like I said, these families who have very long involved stories, and all of it is pertinent to the case. you know they've now been, as I understand, they systematically are just automatically issuing split joint support or joint custody now. They no longer do this battle where I get full custody, I get, more money, you don't get, you get limited visitation every other weekend kind of thing. Now it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, every other Friday, Saturday, Sunday, is the standard. Tuesday, Thursday, every other Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Alternating holidays, etc. I mean, they just basically said enough is enough. Enough of you fighting over, how much your children are worth to you.
Mhm.
on a monthly basis. We're just going to cast a blanket, you know, dictate, across the courts, across family courts, that joint custody is pretty much guaranteed and automatic. That both parents, having, completed the FIT training, the families in transition training, having seen a court-appointed psychiatric evaluator with and without the children, and they just go right to that. I mean, they automatically split custody. They don't even listen to it. Like I said, I mean, it could be an axe murder, and he would get joint custody. Again, I've seen people convicted of heinous things get out of jail and get visitation with their children immediately, unsupervised visitation overnight in their homes. As I understand it, this man's not even related by blood to these children in this
Right.
Dr. Russell case. And as far as I know, as near as I can tell, there may, it appears to be an au pair that does a lot of caretaking. Again, I mentioned this startling trend where, men are targeting, successful young women. And, and again, throughout the whole marriage, they're building their case, that they're workaholics, that they're married to their job, that the men do all the bathing and the teaching and the homework and the cleaning and the laundry and the cooking. They make their more successful partners out, male or female, to be disengaged, to be, completely uninvolved with the children, and they do all the heavy lifting. Oftentimes it's the other way around, that the mother is often the nurturer. But I've seen some great dads too. We got to give the dads a shout out, because I've seen a number of dads in my casework, and I've had the pleasure of seeing the father get custody when the mother was unfit and refused to get fit. That's the goal. I don't want to take anybody's children away from them. I want to take them someplace safe while they get better, while they get the treatment they need, the counseling they need, while they address whatever has brought them to this place where, they will do this or think this is okay, that it be fixed, and addressed and diagnosed, whatever, prior to the children being, subjected to them again. Especially, like I said, for overnight unsupervised visits, it's deeply concerning.
I know a lot of parents want 50-50 shared parenting, but
And they
then
get it
there's
automatically. Here in Kentucky, they get it automatically.
even if one parent is completely unfit.
Correct. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. All day long. Every day. Every single day. In probably almost every county in this state. At some point or another, some very important piece of information gets ignored or dismissed outright because, their story was too long, because they had multiple allegations, because, yes, I've seen cases where, the child was, received a swat on the backside, and reported that to their mother, or a child, a 4-year-old came home with bruises. Again, obviously, our medical professionals, their procedures to verify the nature of many injuries and that kind of thing. But 4-year-olds fall down, things happen. And, if you go in there with every scrape and bump and bruise, and blame the husband or blame the wife, then, after a while, they stop listening. Again, as Shakespeare said, methinks thou doth protest too much. And, if you try to tell everything, you almost have to pick and choose, what acts you can enter or try to enter as an exhibit, because you do so at your own peril. One too many, and you're Chicken Little. The sky is falling, and you're trying to make this guy look bad, with all these allegations. These particular allegations, as I understand them, were mostly private, and again, conducted by trained officers of the courts who were appointed to investigate these matters, or look into these, supervise these children, or what have you. And like I said, the worst part of it is that the real crime is that Dr. Stephanie Russell is now in an environment where every single other inmate sees her as a get out of jail free card. Every single other inmate in that facility is a potential jailhouse snitch, and we all know jailhouse snitches, and they will do anything to get out of that cell, to get and like I said, I mean, even a casual conversation, could turn a snitch into making a full confession based on what they saw on the news, and and it could. She's a very sensitive, very intelligent, um, very nurturing. I mean, she cared for me. I had acute liver failure a couple of years ago, and even as a pediatrician, she cared. She cared for me. She drove an hour across town to care for me in my own home. You know, um, and you just don't do that. I mean, this is when you talk about selfless, you're talking about Dr. Russell, and she gave it all. What I find most fascinating, though, aside from the naysayers, those that will come out of the woodwork with some awful hatred dispute, um, the mothers that I have shared this story with or discussed this story with, um, your podcast that I've shared the podcast with, mothers of 9, um, they all say the same thing. I would have expletive killed him myself.
Mm-hmm.
She went home every day, and I know for a long time, she she was in the depths of the darkest depression she'd ever seen, knowing or believing at least that her children were being subjected to these heinous acts, and she was absolutely powerless. She had no voice in the courtroom, no voice. I mean, and even the voices of those that were in the know and were appointed to do their job were not allowed to do their job. Who doesn't at least look into this? These, like I said, they're having read and seen, enough of these statements personally from the case. I know that my opinion is that there's a very strong likelihood that there may be some veracity to them, simply because, again, how do you script a 5-year-old on a half dozen different stories, with complete with with good answers without hesitation. I mean, things that 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds don't know. Again, very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
The quote alleged victim or would-be victim, and his associations, the actual arresting agency, that's very problematic for me. And like I said, it's important that I think what we'll continue to see here, and what I continue to hear from everybody, is that they would have killed them themselves, that they would die for their children. It's it's nature, it's National Geographic stuff, that that the mother will die for her cubs, and I know my mother would have laid down her life for me. There's no question in my mind, no doubt in my mind. And many of the mothers that I work with, and even the foster parents, the adopted parents, ultimately, they all feel that, that lizard brain, just natural response to their child being in danger or harm. It's, and ultimately, because this is drawn out for so very long, because, again, there's money to be made here because she's a doctor. They, it drug on and on and on until ultimately, I've heard guests say worn down. I'd say she was worn completely through. I mean, imagine all this time having your children taken away and given to basically somebody who's a total stranger, somebody you never knew clearly, and who's not blood relative to this children, who's been accused of all these things, guilty or innocent. Let's find out. Let's find out the truth. I mean, let's not, outright, just out of hand, ignore them because you have beef with their attorney, or their attorney, exposed you, or you're at war with their attorney, or, if you have some personal bias or what have you. But these people find their way, onto the bench on the regular. And excuse me, I apologize as to say that, I may have assisted, not necessarily the family court judges per se, but I have assisted other judges over the years, and or other attorneys in attaining in winning an election, simply by doing a little digging, talking to known associates, and going back, finding people that that they've done wrong, or that they've done something, they've stolen from, or they've lied to, or they've done something awful to, some victim of abuse. Who knows? I mean, many people have a dark past, and you would never tell it. They present as citizens, as human beings, and they're not. Some of them are quite adept at that. And again, I can count at least 5 cases since 2004 that involved men who married college students or recent graduates in the medical field or some other high-paying profession. They worked some mediocre job, and they stayed for an average, as it turns out, an average of 5 years, and they had 2 children. Again, like I said, not just 1, 2, and then they got out. So I'm not saying that this is the case at all. I can't say that. That would be that would be irresponsible. I mean, it would be remiss. It'd be defamatory. I would not do that. But I say, let's get the truth, and that's what I is get the truth. It's not always pleasant. Many times it's very unpleasant. But at the end of the day, it merits further investigation. We need more data, Watson. We need to, and I don't know how we can change an entire system across an entire country. This is the only way, and I've said it a million times. It's going to take somebody like you doing somebody like this, spending your time and your energy, on these powerful, incredible podcasts. I invite everybody to listen to every one of them and buy the book. I did. I bought it last night. It'll be here. It's supposed to be here prime tomorrow.
Thank you.
I very much look forward to it, and I know that I hope that if there's ever anything that I can do for for one of your guests, or one or somebody, anybody out there, obviously I work primarily in Kentucky, but there are things I can do for people wherever they are, that are not investigation related, and I want to help, if I can, if at all possible. Again, obviously, it's, it varies widely, but here, again, I've always observed this disturbing, practice. And now these blanket joint custody orders, and now, the stripping, the actual railroading, if you ask me, of respected member of the community. I work. This is the legal community I work in. This is the sewer I live in. This is where I go in the mornings, or at 3 o'clock in the morning, because bad people don't do bad things from 9 to 5. So these cases involve, a lot of late nights, and a lot of lurking around in the dark, so I see it all. I had a case a couple of years ago. A couple would take their little girl after their shift at the restaurant. They would take their little girl home, adorable, John Bonet, pretty little girl, just a doll, and they would give her Benadryl so that she would fall asleep. And then they would take her to various very nice hotels, in the East End and downtown Louisville, where they would hand her off for a period of time to any stranger that would provide them with enough heroin to get through the night. They still have custody. So, I have video of that. How is that possible? I have video of, and the videos that resulted, some of these sickos actually took video of their acts so that they could relive them. And, and they would dress her up in little cowboy outfits and, and provocative clothing, she's a baby. She wasn't even, as I recall, she wasn't even in school yet. You know, and they got her back.
So
You
there
know,
really there is no justice. There just
oh,
it doesn't. Did it ever
there,
exist?
there's no justice because there's no truth. There's no actual truth, and whether it's, and falsehoods are presented, as a matter of course in the, in the court system. So, that has to be weeded out. And again, I personally, my personal opinion is that they changed this, where couples would battle, for custody and sling mud and, awful allegations at each other, for years, 3-4 years. These divorces would drag out over the custody piece, and the child support and this and the dockets just became overwhelmed. I think that it got much worse during COVID,
Hmm.
and when a lot of court appearances were missed or being held by Zoom or what have you, and these things, again, like I said, it's because nobody's looking for the truth. And again, the agencies that are appointed to do this, the police, the court system, child protective services, crimes against children, they're understaffed. They're over, their cases, they're overwhelmed with cases, so they can't possibly give each case the time that it needs. I mean, this is at the end of the day a staffing problem,
Hmm.
as much as it is an attitude problem. And perhaps therein lies part of the cure. Again, is government funding for these things. Go fund me. I don't care. I mean, whatever it takes, to get to get the truth, just the truth. I mean, good, bad, or indifferent. If my client is guilty of something, then not only am I off the case, but I want to see them. I want to see them. I want to see justice served. Especially if
Hmm.
they've committed some unlawful or defamatory act. Um, I don't see it, and I don't see the work being done. I don't see the investigations lasting more than a few minutes. And again, just like with with this child, with the meth in his system, CPS advised the adoptive mother last week that they have decided to return the child to the mother. This was Joe. Let's see, I'm trying to think. It's been about 3 months, I guess, since they were arrested. So it's been about 90 days. I'm sure she's absolutely off of meth and clean and sober and has her own, suitable living arrangements and a good job and a good car and all that stuff. I'm sure she generated all that in the last 3 months, and got off the methamphetamine. So, again, I think that would be a condition. Again, more of the drug testing. And it's so fallible, because I know so many people that are able to defeat the hair follicle test, which is the most conclusive test that they have, the most accurate test that's
Hmm.
available for the drug addicts, and for anybody, for both parties. My client as well. I mean, put us out there, just as much as you do the defendant, because we have nothing to hide. Perhaps they do. Um,
Hmm.
it's just that you're not hearing it because you either don't have time, or you have some personal issue or some personal vendetta. Many attorneys will say, "You don't want me in that courtroom. It just doesn't like me."
Mm.
What the hell? I mean, isn't this supposed to be? Isn't this the oath that they take, is to be impartial and all, and seek the truth? That is their, and justice. They swear an oath. I mean, that's their effing job. Pardon my language.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
why aren't they doing it?
I
And
think,
and what? So rant.
well, I mean, oh no, I think it's these Title IV incentives that whoever makes the most money is going to lose.
Invariably, that is correct. I can tell you with 30 years of experience, that is absolutely correct. They will, and in this state in particular, the insult to injury is not only do they lose, even major percentages of the businesses that they worked hard to grow, they lose their children, they lose their homes, they lose, um, they lose everything. There's
Hmm.
so much to lose. And again, I think that you may be right. I don't. I don't know exactly what, what the answer is, but I know that I know what the problem is,
Mhm.
and, I'd like to help you fix it, you know, um, how do we do that?
I guess we just keep exposing it and um, educating the public that this stuff does go on. A lot of people don't realize how their tax dollars are really being spent.
No, absolutely. And again, as I said, how these decisions are made, and what really happens behind closed doors. When an attorney who, begs a prosecutor, to give him a break for a high paying client, and next time the prosecutor gets the win, they trade off that way.
Mhm.
They get the big win, the big good looking career win, even at at the cost, at their client's, expense, excuse me, oftentimes more than financial.
Mhm.
And they literally, they trade up, they trade off. Um, Again, I work for a lot of attorneys, but I only work for the reputable ones with integrity, with professional standards, and boundaries, and also the ones who, like me, will never stop. We can't stop because when that phone rings, what are we supposed to do? Not go. There's a child in danger.
Mhm.
There's a female who's being beat down or worse, somewhere, what am I supposed to sit on my couch and watch TV, and disregard? It's just not an option. I think, like this is something that we feel strongly enough about that we would, you know, we would, we will do this with our last breath. I believe.
Mhm.
I firmly know I will, and
Mhm.
I believe you will as well, based on
Mhm.
just what I've already heard and seen. So, you know, kudos to you,
Oh,
for your
thank
fight.
you.
I mean, like I said, you were already kind of a big deal, and now you're taking on this hidden but pervasive cancer in our court systems. That, again, based on 200-year-old ideals, and completely understaffed and completely biased, and able to purchase elections at will. um, this is going to continue without the truth being sought after, and without the manpower, and the you know the the qualified trained manpower to get the truth. um, you know People lie, and there are many ways to circumvent that. I think, CPS, especially, like I said, that's one of the worst cases I've seen. Is that, I recall a time when they had 1,300 cases each in one
Mm.
given year. In one given year, 1,300 cases in 365 days. You do the math. How do you
Mhm.
possibly give that case, that investigation, your full attention? How do you, possibly have time? I don't. I do this for a living. So, it can't be done. There aren't enough hours in the day, and there aren't enough people down there. And I would say that what's most striking is that most of them are just exhausted. They're just
Mhm.
worn out from it. I mean, after years and years of being, being lied to, and seeing the atrocities, that parents, are capable of, that human beings in general, I can't call them human beings, that these
Mhm.
animals are capable of, that after a while they become jaded. Some things become less, um, less of a big deal than some of the big deals they've seen.
Mhm.
They've seen children die. They've seen, I mean, mutilated, the worst cases that you can imagine, pimped out,
Mhm.
infected with poisons, and you know, like I said, those things. I spent a tremendous amount of time on these cases. I spent 2 years on the last case I worked, the last custody battle I worked, and once again, there are good judges in that case. Actually, the last two I've had, Judge Gina Calvert and Judge Tara Haggerty, both, um, allow me to validate my video, go through my report, just the facts, and base their decision to leave the child in the safe environment. You know, um, they took it. They took it to heart. They really listened. They paid attention, and they saw there was concern, and there was there was smoke. Therefore, They believe there was a possibility there was fire, and they took the proper, legal steps, judicial steps, I should say, in those cases. There are a couple of good family court judges out there who are very fair and will actually listen to both sides, and, run their courtroom. It's interesting because, these are the same judges that run their courtroom like a military operation. I mean, it's their courtroom, and you will respect them, and you will not speak, unless spoken to, and, and there will be order, and it will be, a fair and impartial, hearing. These are some of the fairest judges I've ever seen, and also some of the most involved, I guess. When they see something like this, you can see their anger. They're personally, offended by these actions, these activities, and so they're not all bad. But a lot of them, but they're all human. Let's just put it that way. And human beings are opinionated, fallible, fickle creatures. They have their own hidden agendas and their own hidden prejudices. They have good days and they have bad days. I know, and I've seen it, like I said, where a judge, everybody gets out on a Thursday, but Friday morning after that Thursday night drunk, nobody's getting out. He just wants to move on to the next case and go home and go sleep. Sleep it off, that kind of thing. It's what do you do? Human error, human fallacy, human shortcomings. These are the causes, and again, like I said, the manpower. The courts need the manpower to be able to investigate these matters. If a proper investigation had been done and these allegations were false, then Dr. Stephanie Russell deserves whatever she gets, at least for that, for doing that. I don't know what about this other matter. I only know what they say on the news and what I found out through my own curiosity. Can it be fixed? Absolutely. Is it going to require, massive hiring, training, of court personnel, cabinet members, that kind of thing? Potentially. But, again, COVID pushed everything back so much. Then there was no courts for almost 2 years. And then they were doing the Zoom courts for 2 years. And then we're still doing Zoom courts here on many cases. So, a lot is obscured and a lot is lost in communication, and a lot is misread or misinterpreted or just misapplied, out of sheer spite. And in this case, I believe that it's sheer spite from the judge, and I don't know, again, I can't attest or even, comment on the other women that I know that have been targeted. I say targeted, the ones who just cannot seem to get a break in that courtroom, who have valid, orders and motions that I've seen, submitted, requested and submitted, and not even looked at, outright denied. We need the truth, and we're not getting it because these, many of these judges don't care about the truth. They just, have their own, they have their own agenda, their own personality, and their own, the things that they don't like, whatever it may be. Like I said, humans are, they're racist, and they're prejudiced, and they're homophobic, and they're small-minded, that's who's on the bench. That's who's working for these agencies. That it's not my department, but in this case, I think ample reports were filed to justify, further investigation, and not one of the agencies. I believe Crimes Against Children was even involved in one. I can't say that for sure, but it seems likely. And they were ignored. They were not, the motion to at least address this was not allowed. Who wouldn't want to hear more about this? Who wouldn't want to get to the bottom of this? Because if he's innocent, then then that's not okay. Then what she's done is she's, she's lied, is to further her own means and what have you. But again, I've yet to meet anybody who's ever met Dr. Stephanie Russell that says she's capable of, capable of a dirty joke, much less a white lie. I mean, this particular allegation, I think, again, if people knew more about what this woman's really been through, and it's all public record. Go look for yourself before you you say something hateful, or you again find her guilty before she's proven innocent, as promised in our beloved Constitution. It's tough, and do your research, or shut up. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. They're not entitled to share it. At least not with me. And like I said, so I don't put that in the universe. I don't respond to those things. I don't give them any credence by responding to them or attempting to respond, simply because that's what they want. They want to generate, some reaction. They want to hurt. They want to hurt somebody like they hurt. Maybe, I don't know. Who knows why people do what they do. They'll do it in this one, but I do think we'll see support as well. We'll see major support as well. I think this is a Lifetime movie waiting to happen. I think this is, I think this is, a travesty. And again, I'm even more concerned now, because her situation is dire. This is a citizen, a civilian. Again, never had a parking ticket. Now she's in custody, in federal custody, in a federal penitentiary, in a prison, with a million other women who, or however many other women in her particular pod, let's say, or who she might be exposed to, the court call or what have you. Anybody that she might have a brief conversation with, could turn this into a snitch deal and get out. And she's so innocent, when you talk to her, she's so knowledgeable, but she's very, I guess what it was, she worked so very hard at perfecting, her medical jazz, that she missed out on a lot of social cues. While we were out, partying and having cocktails with our friends on Friday nights, she was nosing a medical book, and that's the honest to God's truth. She was so naive and so broken, that, I think, somebody in that situation is capable of anything, if that's the case. If not, then so be it, but get the truth.
Right. And I'm so glad I had you on, and I know I'll have you on again. So, if people need to reach you, how do you want to be reached?
Sometimes, especially in Eastern Kentucky, it's difficult to get service. My email is most guaranteed way to reach me every time. It's Steve at KYSIU. That's KYS as in Sam, IU.com. Send me an email with the basics. Again, if time permits, I'll be happy to look into it. If I'm authorized to do so, or if it's something, if it's something I can help with, I can't not, you know what I mean? And, I understand that people don't have, a lot of money. So, like I said, I found that I was never more successful in this business. First of all, because I've never advertised, spent a dime on advertising, never passed out a business card or a brochure. I believe that if you're good at what you do, you don't have to advertise if you're that good. And for 30 years, I've lived, a very comfortable life and a very successful career on strictly referral business. People don't call Kentucky Special Investigative Unit, they call Steve Thomas, because they get my number from somebody else that I helped previously. And to me, that's the best, that's the best advertisement that you can get. So, send me an email, again, I get a lot of them, and, we're busy, but we're never too busy to help. So by all means, I am.
Well, thank you so much. And, okay, well, thank you, Steve Thomas, PI. Don't jump off. Slam the Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. Please join us again here with Steve Thomas in the future and other exciting guests. Thank you again, Steve. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.